Good evening, and welcome to another edition of the newly named The Murphy Show. We asked last edition for suggestions on a name, and a lot of people liked the logo. So to keep the logo and not change the logo, instead of it being called The Tom Murphy Show, it's just The Murphy Show. There you have it. Tonight, and at the end of the last show, we talked a little bit about a pet peeve of mine, which was the Board of Elections, which I didn't think was being run as efficiently as it could be. But tonight we're going to do the other side of the coin and talk about an aspect of Westchester County government that's being run much more efficiently than it ever was, the County Clerk's office. And tonight, we're very privileged to have here with us tonight the County Clerk of Westchester County, Tim Idoni. Tim, thanks for showing up.
Great to be here, Tom. Thank you.
Thank you. Tim, can you tell me, I know there's been a lot of innovation and change in the County Clerk's office over the past 5-6 years. Could you tell me about some of that?
Sure. We've been there. We just finished our 7th year up there, and the office when I first walked in 2006 was basically could be described as a mass of paper, cardboard boxes, literally hundreds and hundreds of boxes of paper. Some of it which included deeds and mortgages with checks attached to them, because the office was somewhere between 4 and 6 months behind, depending on who you talk to, in processing real estate transactions. The real estate boom was going on, not to degrade my predecessor, but there were better ways of doing stuff, to put it mildly. And the first thing we started to do was to find innovative ways using electronic submissions, using computer systems, digitizing paper, to cut back on the amount of paper that came into the office, to cut back on the amount of paper that needed to be transmitted, and cut back the amount of paper that needed to be stored, because there is a cost to storing things in any business, especially government. So we went to work on that, and then what we did was we then came up with, the first thing to do was we actually put our legal division into an e-filing system with the help of the Office of Court Administration, which now, to give you an example, we would do close to 30,000 files a year, court cases a year. Mm-hmm. Of that, they were all paper. Now in 2013, only about 3,000, 4,000 of them are paper, cutting way back on that type of work.
Just to kind of educate the public a little bit, when you said court cases, every court decision in Westchester County has to be filed with the County Clerk's office.
Well, every court case in the Supreme Court and the county courts, which is the predominant areas of the court system in Westchester County. We don't do the family courts. We don't do circuit courts. We do everything else, which is substantial. I'm glad you mentioned that. I am the clerk of the courts for those two courts, and it's my job to make sure that the paper runs, and now the electronic filings run smoothly into the court system and then back out when they come back, when the cases are done. We handle civil cases. We handle some criminal cases. We handle foreclosures, tax certioraries, matrimonials. 15% of our work is our matrimonials or divorce cases. Okay. And so a lot of the most sensitive things in people's lives wind up in my office, whether it be that or, as I said, on the land record side, those are real estate, deeds, mortgages, anything connected with the closing of a home. We then went into the e-recording this year of deeds and mortgages, and pretty soon, I would say within the next 3 years, 4 years or so, when you go to a house closing, you may not ever see any paper there. Everything will be done on a computer.
That would be.
I spent 2 years in Albany lobbying to allow for electronic recordings of documents such as this. Came through in flying colors. We started September 24th this year. And all those boxes of paper are now disappearing. We still get a lot of paper, but we've cut way back. And what's the result? Well, obviously we don't have to move the paper, but we also save a ridiculous amount of money. We're actually spending less money now than we were in 2006, despite union raises and everything else. We've been able to cut 35 full-time positions out of the budget without laying anybody off.
Through attrition?
Yeah, through attrition. People leave, we reorganize the department, then reorganized again. We've been able to cut back, as I said, on storage costs, cut back on postage. An electronic document doesn't have to be mailed back to the attorney. Right. So you start fitting all these things together, and it's a good model for all government to think about.
Certainly is. It must, the attorneys who are working on cases must appreciate it, because the access to information is their stock and trade.
Well, you're absolutely right. Change is hard, though. I mean, they were a little scared of this stuff when I first started out. But what we did was we went out and we partnered.
It might lead to less billable hours.
Well, yeah, I doubt it.
That's right. Yeah.
But sorry to those attorneys that are watching the show. But we know what we did. We went out. We partnered with the Westchester Bar Association. We went out with the Land Title Association. All these groups that are affiliated with the work that we do, and we explained things to them. They worked with us to make sure the process was done properly. We went up to the state and did the same thing at the state level. And then when we finished it, we brought them in and we did training sessions. We've trained over 1,000 attorneys in Westchester County to the methods that we're now using, and they love it.
I'm
They
sure.
really do.
Yeah.
You know, and now we're working on the national banks on things like mortgage satisfactions. When somebody closes, they have to satisfy the mortgage. The big banks, Wells Fargo, Chase, we're trying to bring them in on the electronic recording. They want to do it. They're anxious to do it. They got to learn it, and it'll work.
Now, let me just touch on another area that your office handles, and that is the administration of gun permits.
Oh yeah.
And there's been a big strum and drang over the Journal News printing, I think it was Rockland and Westchester County gun permit owners.
Right.
And I just want to express from my point of view, you know, the people whose names appeared had gone through a legal process and were legal gun owners. And I understand that the information should be public because it's public information. But for the Journal News, I mean, it can't. What it seemed to me journalistically was the Journal News just threw this in the paper without any understanding or any sifting through the information. And what always interests me is, you know, who gets permits and why do they get permits and how do permits come about?
Right.
I mean, you don't want to criminalize your in any way, you know, cast aspersions on the people who have permits. They did it lawfully.
Right.
It's fine to have a gun permit. You know, you want people to get permits. You don't want people to have illegal guns.
Right.
So could you just explain the process and what was the process like when you took office? And how's the process different now?
It's one of the few things in New York State, not just in Westchester in my office, that hasn't changed a bit in 30 years. Even the fees are, if you file for an index number or file a law case in our legal division, it's gone from $35 to $210 over the last 20 years or so. Pistol permits are still $10. And the amendment to a pistol permit, when you add a gun or subtract a gun, you have to pay us $3. It is dirt cheap to get a pistol permit in Westchester, and it's the whole state of New York. Those fees are set throughout the state of New York. So it's almost still an archaic system. However, what's gotten more sophisticated and good for us is that the reviews by the Public Safety Department, when somebody files an application, you have to have the whole thing vetted. They do background checks, they do fingerprinting, they do a lot of stuff. All that kind of work is now really 21st century. And the Public Safety Department in Westchester County does a great job. My job is basically to take the applications, make sure it's filled out, give it to Public Safety. They review everything. We get it back and we send it up to the courts because the licensing officers in Westchester County are the county court judges.
So they actually issue the license?
They sign off on a license, and then it comes back down to me, and we do the administrative work. We actually print out the pistol permits. We put the guns on the back of the permit so that if a police officer pulls somebody over and says, you got 4 guns in the back of your car, and there's only 2 on the license, they get pulled in because they are now carrying 2 guns they're not supposed to carry.
Right, so the serial number of the gun has to be on the license too.
Well, no, not the serial, not just the kind of gun it
The
is.
kind of gun?
They match it up that way. Of course, it's a criminal situation, then they start getting into serial numbers and all that. We don't worry about that from our end. However, it gets a little sticky sometimes. People sometimes get complained that they shouldn't have been turned down. They were turned down. Mr. Idoni, why aren't you giving me some help in getting this taken care of? Doesn't work that way. It's a very clean system.
Right, and
the judges are the only people that have the right to decide these decisions, make these decisions.
Right, and that's the way you want it. You don't want people using political influence to get a pistol permit. Because with all the whole thing about government is that if people believe that the table's not tilted, they'll buy in.
Absolutely.
But once they think the table's tilted one way or the other, they're going to say, well, why should I follow rules?
That's absolutely correct. And truthfully, at one time that was tilted. One of the things that I promised to do when I ran in 2005 for the first time was that I was going to level the table and make sure things were done on an equitable basis. You know, pistol permits would be steered to a particular judge who may be more apt to give an approval than another judge. That stuff has ended. It goes through the court system now nice and cleanly. So
that's what I thought the Journal News story should be about. Who gets pistol permits and how they get them.
Yeah.
Not that people have them.
Yeah.
Because it's like anything else.
That's not going to change. People are going to have pistols. The fact that it's a concealed weapon is why a pistol is different than a rifle. There are no permits for rifles in New York State.
Right.
Some of these issues that have happened, unfortunately, over the last few months, especially in Newtown, Connecticut, were rifles that wouldn't even be permitted in New York State and weren't permitted in Connecticut either.
Right.
That's up to people smarter than me to figure out. But there's going to be some strong things happening in Albany. in terms of
Assault weapons?
in terms of assault weapons for sure, and in terms of this issue that's going around now, which is that their names and addresses go public, and they have been public for a long, long time, well over 30 years. And as a matter of fact,
And that's by New York State law.
That's New York State law. It says the penal law, section 400, I've got it memorized now,
I
says
bet
that,
you
all names and addresses shall be a public record, which means if somebody asks me for it, I got to give it up.
Exactly.
The Putnam County Clerk and the county executive up there made a conscientious decision to say no. They're going to test this in court. They're going to lose. They're grandstanding. There's been numerous court cases on this. As you know, case law determines all this. And every case that's been adjudicated under this section of the law has gone in favor of the public record.
Well, you've done your job. You've upheld your oath of office to follow the laws in New York State.
Exactly.
And
exactly.
you're to be commended for that. You don't make that law, you just enforce that law.
Yeah, and as you know, you've known me for a long time, Tom. I'm not a grandstander. It
No,
was
you're
very easy to go out there and grandstand and say, oh, I'm not going to do this, and then a week later the judge orders you to do it anyway.
And and they have the king grandstander up there, Greg Ball. But that's just my opinion.
No doubt about it.
Yeah. when the grandstanders get together, they named him king.
That's great.
Let's talk a little bit about other things that are going on in the county.
Yeah.
There's been a lot of controversy over the years, and this is an ongoing situation, about the housing settlement. And I grew up in affordable housing and subsidized housing in New York City, and that benefited my life a lot, and my parents' life, and my brother's. And I know you've always been a supporter of affordable housing, which I just want to clarify this, because affordable housing does not necessarily mean public housing and projects.
As a matter of fact, it doesn't at all.
It doesn't mean that at all.
Doesn't at all.
Exactly.
As you probably remember, before I was mayor of New Rochelle back in 1991, I built affordable housing for the New Rochelle Neighborhood Revitalization Corporation. We maintained a public housing project not far from the Mamaroneck line, as a matter of fact, on Fifth Avenue. That was a low-income housing project, which we tried to turn into a more of affordable, to have less of the mystique, so we say, of a low-income housing project. But affordable housing is absolutely necessary in this county. Every economist that I've ever talked to has said that one of the biggest issues in Westchester is having working class people making $35,000, $45,000, $55,000, $75,000, be able to afford to live here. And it's a driving force, no matter what the courts may say or the federal government may say about one community has not done the right thing from an ethnic, racial, income level type of situation. We need affordable housing built in this county to keep the local economy going. People have to be able to live here. And there's plenty of room for it in most communities. It shouldn't have a mystique of, I've heard this quote too many times, those people are moving in. I don't want to ask who those people are. I can imagine who they're talking about.
Well, I used to be one of those people. Yeah.
Well, and it's...
Some people might feel that way about my moving here, but the heck with them.
Oh, I'm glad you're here. You've been a great public servant for a long time too, But so I've studied the issue, I've worked the issue, and the resistance to this is basically a political resistance, as far as I'm concerned. I have a strong disagreement with the county executive on this particular issue. I think he tried to delay the process in the hopes that perhaps his guy would have won the presidency, and maybe the Housing and Urban Development Department at the federal level would change their attitude toward Washington. Well, they lost. The same people are here, and it's going to be another hot button issue probably by springtime here. And there are a number of communities, by the way, that are participating in the program.
Just so to kind of give a little background, there was a county entered into a settlement agreement with the federal government, and there were certain stipulations. And if correct me if I'm wrong, but the person who was hired to oversee that has now stated that the county is in violation of that.
Correct.
And blatant violation in some sense, especially with the Section 8 housing law, where they were told they're playing a semantic game that, we proposed it, but we don't have to support it, and he vetoes it. So it's almost like throwing it in their face.
Yeah, that particular law was, very simply put, a law that would promote the ability for people to get housing. And in a sense, maybe force a landlord to take Section 8, but Section 8 people are working families.
Exactly.
There's no disgrace in taking a Section 8 certificate. I used to work Section 8 administration for a number of years. There's nothing wrong with that. He vetoed the bill, which put us right into a violation of the federal mandates. And it's time for them to wake up and get the thing done. It's not that many units.
You had to know that vetoing the bill was going to open up a hornet's nest. So when you do something like that and you're a public official, you're opening up a hornet's nest for what? For a political reason.
Playing your base.
Yeah, you're playing your base. You know, you're trying to divide us, and you're not trying to unite us.
Absolutely.
And that, to me, is the worst kind of way to govern. You know, you could sit there and say, I didn't negotiate this, I don't agree with it, but you know, it's something the county agreed to, and I have a duty as an elected official to, you know, it's a contract
Absolutely.
that I have to follow.
No doubt about it.